Hello Internet, welcome back to Psycho Month. After having looked at the really surprisingly and rather excellent Psycho 2, we're going to mop up the rest of the franchise in one go. We're going to have a whistle-stop tour through parts 3 and 4, the beginning. And having rewatched them, I'm going to have to admit that even though it gets trashed quite a lot, I've got a soft spot for Psycho 3. Look, any film that starts with a completely blank screen and then someone screaming at the top of their lungs, "There is no God!" You've got my fucking attention right there. The film that I think everyone assumed Psycho 2 was going to be, oh my god, they're making a sequel to the beloved Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, right in the midst of a boom of slasher movies. The film that everyone thought Psycho 2 was going to be, Psycho 3 is, and I kind of love it for that. Whereas Psycho 2 was smart, took twists, played with your expectations based on the first movie. It, let's be honest, had really mined all the possibilities of clever things that you could do with Norman's story. Because of Psycho 2, Psycho 3 had to be Norman dresses up as his mother and kills people. It had to veer more into the slasher territory, I guess. Or, I don't know, maybe I could be more imaginative and think of something slightly better. I just like the idea that in the first movie, it's sort of a, we all know what the twist reveal is, and then it colours the entire movie that's gone before it. In the second one, there's a lot of a whodunit sort of aspect, and is Norman going crazy? You're kind of pulling for Norman, and for the most part, he's the good guy. But come on, by the end of that film, he's back to batshit, and he's back to talking to Mother. This film, although filmed 3 years later, was actually set 1 month after Psycho 2. And for fans of continuity porn like me, it's actually a delight, the opening of the movie. The book that Meg Tilly's character is reading in Psycho 2 is seen outside by the bird table, sort of covered in autumnal leaves. We revisit the diner from part 2, and the sheriff and the guy that runs the diner and the maid from the diner, they all come back. There's a nice little newspaper article about a missing person who was killed at the end of Psycho 2, Mrs. Spool. So watching them back to back for someone who loves these continuity nods, that's an absolute treat. But make no mistake, this is a sleazy, skanky movie. It's sort of like the sweaty red light district underbelly of the Psycho franchise. If you want to try and legitimize it, Psycho is Psycho. Psycho 2 was a very clever sort of intellectual exercise, and Psycho 3 just sweeps all of that away, and we really do look at the other side of Norman's personality, which up until now has been briefly touched upon, which is sex. Anytime Norman thinks about sex or gets sexually attracted to a woman, she's in trouble because Mother takes over. But they run a motel and people come there to screw. So yes, it's a product of its time. There's gratuitous nudity. The gore factor is a lot higher, but it's not like a Friday the 13th movie. It's not like a stalk and slash movie. It still retains some of the class, I think, a holdover of the class from parts 1 and 2. Anthony Perkins, at this point in Norman's arc, if you want to call it that, is completely unhinged and freaked out and paranoid. It's only been a month since Lila Loomis in part 2 and her daughter have essentially succeeded in driving him insane again. He's been hiding bodies, he's waiting for things to be discovered. Now all of a sudden there's a big football game and the motel is full. He's just hired a really scuzzy Jeff Fahey, who I love Jeff Fahey, and watching him play a slime ball in this sleazy kind of movie is excellent fun. What is it, Duke? He plays a character called Duke. So now all of a sudden Norman's little idyll, his sanctuary away from the world, is completely and utterly overrun, and it's almost for the most part it's one night at the Bates Motel that goes really badly wrong. Because the veil's been drawn away now, because there's no pretense about who Norman is and what he's about, we actually get a lot more interaction between him and Mother, the corpse, and that's really creepy. And I love that kind of stuff, and the way that in his mind the corpse moves, and the way she's shot, so backlit again, so the face is in shadow. Ugh, that gives me the frickin' heebie-jeebies. There's a lot more. The camera's eye seems to be a lot more from Norman's mind's eye. We get a lot more of the crazy in this. And there's plenty of crazy to go around. There's a delicious moment where Norman's putting the body of a woman in the swamp, as he does, and he's holding her, and he's just about to lower her into the swamp, and he steals a kiss from this corpse. And that's kind of what Norman's all about. It's always been hinted at, this sort of necrophiliac Ed Gein type aspect, but now we're in the third film in the series, we can just dispense with all the illusions, and we can just flat out show kind of the worst aspects of Norman, the weirder aspects of Norman, the psychosexual aspects of Norman. Throw religion into the mix, and you've got quite the pot boiler. The female heroine is a nun who loses her faith, thus the "there is no God" opening, and she's all over the place in a nice little twist to what was going to be a replay of the shower scene. Norman, as Mother, comes into cabin 1, pulls the shower curtain aside, ready to kill her, but she's way ahead of the curve on this one. She's in the bathtub and she's slit her wrists and is already dying, and with lack of blood and in the dying mode, she sees the backlit Norman dressed as Mother as a vision of the Virgin Mary. Norman actually saves her life, and she thinks that the Virgin Mary came to her. So she's going through this massive crisis of faith. Do you know what? More religion. There should have been more religion in it. This film really should have gone for it. It's kind of the Grindhouse film of the Psycho series anyway. I really wish now they'd have amped up more of it. So we jump forward 4 years, 1990, and Psycho 4, the beginning. It's a movie that was made for TV, and it kind of shows. They bring back Joseph Stefano, the guy who wrote the script for the original movie, I guess to try and class it up. But let's be honest, when you've got if you read Robert Bloch's book of Psycho, Stefano really didn't have to do much. Pretty much everything's there. He just had to tighten up a few things to keep the page count down and the runtime correct. So I know that sounds like a slight on Joseph Stefano. It's not meant to be, but Robert Bloch's book pretty much was the script for Psycho, and so coming to the property, having to come up with a completely fresh and original idea, I think it would possibly by this point stretch any writer. The idea they did come up with was kind of to have their cake and eat it. This is a sequel and a prequel both at the same time. Although it's not entirely clear which it's a sequel to, I strongly suspect it's supposed to play as a direct sequel to the first film and ignore parts 2 and 3. By the end of part 3, Norman's getting locked up for the rest of his natural life, so the idea that he's cured and back out now is kind of ridiculous. So I guess the only way to make it work is to treat it as a direct sequel to the original film. And if you watch those back to back, boy does part 4 pale in comparison. I don't want to trash on the film, but it's kind of a stew. There's some good stuff in there, and there's some annoying stuff in there. The framing device is very, very strange. CCH Pounder, who is an actress that I absolutely love, is a talk radio host, and she's tonight's subject is matricide, boys who kill their mothers, which is kind of convenient. And Norman phones in and says, you know, I've got some insight into this, and I'm going to kill again. Bum, bum, bum. Who's he going to kill? There's all of this. We have to keep him on the air. We have to find out who he is because he's using a fake name. Someone's life is in danger, and all of this detective work going on whilst Norman's also telling his story, and there are flashes back to his childhood and why he became the way he became. That sounds pretty good, right? Unfortunately, what you do get is lots of very earnest telephone conversations. And there's no way to carry on filming that and make that exciting and dynamic. Mick Garris, the director, has cameras circling the room and sweeping round and down. Essentially, someone sat at a desk talking on the phone. There's only so many ways you can make this visually arresting, and he tries every trick in the book, and by the end it gets quite comedic. I'm not the first person to suggest this. If you want Anthony Perkins in your Psycho movie, and why the hell wouldn't you, make the framing device him in an asylum and someone comes to interview him. That would strip away this nonsense part of the storyline of them trying to get information from him to find out who he is and therefore who he's going to kill, because by the time he hangs up the phone for the final act anyway, all of those characters go away. Any sort of inroads they made to trying to save this person become completely and utterly null and void. So it is screen time that's absolutely wasted. I would much rather have had screen time, if it had to be in the modern day, someone face-to-face interviewing Norman Bates. You could have made that a lot more visually interesting. Plus, if you strip out that stupid aspect of the story, you could have spent more time with the flashbacks, and the flashbacks could have been a hell of a lot more interesting. As it is, they're kind of weird and kind of fumbled for a couple of reasons. One of them, sadly, is Henry Thomas, the kid from E.T., the guy they get to play a young Norman. There's no performance connection between him and Anthony Perkins. He doesn't seem to have studied the original film. He doesn't seem to care about any of the mannerisms. To be honest, he doesn't seem to care. Olivia Hussey plays Mrs. Bates, and she does it with great gusto. You're either going to love that performance or you're going to hate it. It's an unexpected Norma Bates, because she's a lot younger and she's a lot sexier than you were expecting, and they do explain this in the film. Norman says, he says, I could never get my mother's voice right, I think kind of to explain away Olivia Hussey's accent, and why Mother never had that accent. So Norman, which I think is a brilliant piece of writing, I could never get her voice right. And secondly, he says that even though she died young, in his mind's eye, she continued to age. So by the time we meet her in the first film, in Norman's mind, she's an old woman. That's a lovely piece of retconning there. That's fine. That gets points for me. There's another little point that Joseph Stefano puts in, which kind of makes the whole thing worthwhile for me from a continuity lover's point of view. Norman, we know, poisons his mother and her boyfriend, and when he steals the body and lays her back out on the bed, he says that the mortician, he even put a wig on her because of what the strychnine did to her hair, and young Norman pulls this wig off, the now iconic wig, and that explains away the wig as well, which is which I love that little touch. Okay, right, yeah, that all kind of makes sense. He poisoned her with strychnine, it screwed up her hair, so to present her in the coffin, he put a wig on her, and now Norman's stolen the body and the wig, and he uses the wig to become Mother. Also, the order they put the flashbacks in is very strange. I understand that they want to build up to Norman killing his mum and her boyfriend, a character called Chet, who I have to name check because he's played brilliantly by Tom Schuster. I don't know him in anything else, but the second Chet arrives on the screen, you want to stab him yourself, you want to poison him yourself. It's an excellent kind of tongue-in-cheek, kind of out there performance. You're supposed to understand why Norman loathes Chet, and Tom Schuster leaves you under no illusions as to why Norman would want to kill this douchebag. But as I say, I can understand why you would want to build up to that event, because it's the event that fractures his psyche, makes him want to keep Mother alive as an alternate personality. So it's the climax of the movie. Unfortunately, because of that, the first flashback you get, Mother's already dead and Norman does his first kill. So all of this has kind of already happened. Then the next flashback is an even younger little boy, and it jumps around because they need to have some kills in there, I guess. And it just feels a little messy. It feels undercooked. The whole film feels undercooked. And the final thing I'll say about Psycho 4, the beginning, is the reason he's going to kill again is Norman is now married and has found out that his wife has fallen pregnant, and he doesn't want the genetic insanity to pass to the next generation. He doesn't want her to give birth to a monster. The whole of the third act is this is all set on Norma's birthday, by the way, for no good reason. He asks to meet her at his mother's old house, and he's going to stab her, and there's a chase around the house, and then she persuades him that he's a good man, and then he burns the house down, but as he does, the ghosts of his victims, not the ghosts, in his mind, the mind ghosts of his victims, try and stop him getting out of the house, attack him one last time. But I'm just going to call a bit of BS on this. Norman says in the film that from day one when he met her, you know, he has been absolutely clear and straight that he doesn't want kids. We actually find out that she stopped taking the pill and didn't tell him so that she could essentially trick him into making her pregnant. This is the most horrific marriage imaginable. He then takes her out to an abandoned house, tries to stab her, I mean really tries to kill her, and just because she says you're a good man and he drops the knife, we're supposed to believe that this horrible, horrible couple who are hugely emotionally damaging for one another are going to go off and live happily ever after. No. And then I know why I brought up ghosts earlier, because Norman burns the house down and says, I'm free, I'm finally free. And the final shot is the rocking chair in the basement, moving backwards and forwards, rocking on its own. I turned to my girlfriend and went, what, there's a ghost in this now? And the camera pulls back, and the doors to the cellar close, and then you hear Mother saying, Norman, let me out, let me out. And then the screen goes black, and then you hear a baby crying. So is the ghost of Mother, are we supposed to now expect that the ghost of Mother is going to possess the... What? Where did all of this come from? It's all undercooked. It's all a mess. And it only serves to make Psycho 3 look that much better in comparison. And Psycho 3 is not a classy movie, but if you want to see a grindhouse version of a Psycho movie, go for that. There was a TV series between parts 3 and 4, a TV series called Bates Motel that they tried to get off the ground, that they only made a pilot for. You can check it out elsewhere on YouTube. I've tried to watch it. It's about a guy who befriends Norman in this. It completely ignores everything but the first movie. A guy befriends Norman in the sanatorium. Norman dies incarcerated and wills this guy the motel, and he goes there upon release to try and start it as a business. I only managed to watch the first 20 minutes. I couldn't stand it. I believe, from what I've read, that it was intended to have supernatural elements to it, and there was supposed to be a guest or guests of the week moving into the motel, and their problems would either get sorted out or not while this guy tried to run the motel. Anyway, that died a death, kind of, thank God. And I'll hand on heart, I've only watched the first episode of the new Bates Motel TV series. I know it's got a lot of fans. It's gone the Hannibal route. It's set chronologically before the first film, but set in the modern day. It's just never something that really grabbed me after the pilot. I'll be honest with you. I watched the first episode of Bates Motel and the first episode of Hannibal on the same night, and I expected the Bates Motel TV series to have legs and places to go, and I thought Hannibal would be a hot mess, and I fell in love with Hannibal, and Bates Motel fell by the wayside. So I'm sorry, I can't comment on the TV series, the current TV series. I understand it's got a huge dedicated following, and I've seen clips of the kid that plays Norman in this. Now there's a guy that studied Perkins' performance. I can't, from the little I've seen of what he does with a young Norman, I can't fault that at all. But for the big screen, that's it for Psycho until 1998 and Gus Van Sant's movie, which later on in Psycho Month I will be defending. God help me. Oh no, he can't. There is no God. Oh, I'm in trouble.